Welcome to Work Comp Talk, a podcast dedicated to educating the injured workers in California. We have tons and tons of videos for you to look at, audios to listen to, and most importantly, the information you can grab to equip yourself for a successful workers' comp story. Joining me is my co-host, Bilal Kassem, managing attorney of Pacific Workers, the Lawyers for Injured Workers, who also happen to be the sponsors of our podcast. Check out their website. It's linked below. And if you have yet to hit the subscribe button, make sure you do so now so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories we have for you, tips, and of course, information regarding workers' comp. Today is going to be a lot of pain points that someone who's been injured at work constantly questions. For example, why do things take so long? Why, if I need to visit a doctor, am I not allowed to just get an appointment right away? Why are my payments not kicking in if the doctor already gave a report that I have X, Y, and Z? Why do things run so slow in workers' comp? And I hope we can pick your brain today, Bilal, because you're the person that everyone loves to see on YouTube because you tell it like it is. So tell it like it is. Why does workers' comp lag, per se?
Workers' comp lags in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. And some of it's just because of the way the law is set up, and other parts of it is because of what's involved in the process to get things done. And so I think you look at it in two different angles. It's the stuff that goes on in court and the stuff that goes on outside of court. Mm-hmm. I think the easiest one to tackle first is probably what goes on in court. The Workers' Compensation Appeals Board is the court that we go to for any and all workers' comp disputes in California. And it's a crowded court. There's only so many judges, there's only so many hearings, and there's a lot of injured workers, and they all need attention. And
so what would be your number per se of injured workers in California per year? Do you even happen to know, like, rough estimate? How many people get injured?
That's a really good question. They do have some stats available. I don't know them off the top of my head as of recently. I know there's some appeals boards, which is the Work Comp Appeals Board. They have different venues. So if you're in Los Angeles, you can go to Van Nuys or Los Angeles. Right. There's Pomona, there's San Diego, there's Bakersfield up in Northern California. We have Oakland. We have San Francisco. There's now Lodi. There's Sacramento. There's a bunch of different boards, and they all serve workers local to their communities, obviously, for the convenience of those people. But it depends on the boards and which ones are the most active and where they're located, because Oakland's going to be more of an active board than, say, Redding. Mm-hmm. Right? Same thing, Los Angeles, likely more than San Diego, right? So it just depends. But I would say, at least each board has thousands and thousands of cases filed every single month, and so I don't know how many active cases there are. My guess would be hundreds of thousands or something in total.
I mean, our studios are located right in front of a urgent center or urgent care for injured workers, and we see them walk in on a daily basis, and it's not one or two people. It's like completely packed every single day. So that kind of makes sense to what you just said. That there's only a certain amount of judges and for all the amount of cases.
And we don't get to pick our court dates. Well, we do, but it's based on availability in certain types of hearings and stuff. And so if there's an issue that we need to address in court, usually that involves, we file what's called the Declaration of Readiness, which means that's a document we file at the board to say, hey, court, we need your attention. We need help with something, and we need a court date. And when we file that, we pick our court dates, usually, depending on the type of hearing. And it's the availability of the court that limits our choice. And so we could have a client with an urgent need. Maybe they're, desperate for benefits or surgery or something. Mm-hmm. But we may not be able to get them a court date till the 30th day, or sometimes longer, sometimes 45th day. It's sometimes setting out 2 months. It just depends. And even then, you don't necessarily get a disposition at a hearing. You don't get resolution sometimes. It gets continued to a later date because there's some complication, or it takes time for the judge to issue a decision after trial. So just because you get a court date or you're requesting a court date doesn't guarantee that you're going to get an immediate remedy.
So there's that component, which is, you're waiting on the court dates to be available and they can take some time. Okay, got it. Yep. That's the inside of the court stuff, right? Yep. What's the outside of the court stuff?
So, one I would say is the way the law is set up. For example, when someone is injured, legally the insurance company has 90 days to investigate the claim once it's filed. Now, that may not seem like a tremendous amount of time, but when you're someone who's off of work and injured and suffering, it's a tremendous amount of time.
It's horrible.
Yeah. And so during a delay period, for example, which is when the insurance company receives the claim and says, hey, we're going to investigate this. We're not sure we want to pick up liability for it. They don't have to pay benefits. They have to authorize up to $10,000 in medical care subject to a utilization review, but they don't owe you temporary disability. So you could be off of work due to your injury while the claim is delayed and not receiving temporary disability from the insurance company. And that can go on for up to 90 days.
Shoot. So that's when you have to pull your personal time off, sick days, obviously.
Sick days or apply for, state disability through EDD. But even then, those aren't things that are, you don't know you should do those things. You don't feel comfortable doing those things. You don't even know their options, and the insurance company, they don't care, obviously. They're just going to do what they need to do to investigate. But for you, it seems like forever. I'd say more than a couple days off work to someone without compensation or pay is a tremendous loss for them.
It is. I mean, most of us live paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. It's like, where your money's coming from. You're expecting that money because you have bills to pay. Here in the Bay Area, it's expensive. You don't have the luxury to sit on thousands of dollars. It's just not the way life is, and it should be, but unfortunately it's reality, right? So you don't get paid 2-3 days. That's going to hit your bills. That's going to hit your home hard.
Yeah, the landlord doesn't care. Landlord's going to say, where's rent on the first, That's that. In other ways too, for medical care, for example, mm-hmm. I think a lot of us are used to going to our own doctors through insurance and saying, hey, you know what, like my chest's bothering me. And the doctor says, okay, cool. Let's do a pulmonary function test to test your breathing. Let me listen to you. Let me order a chest x-ray or a CT scan. Let's see what's going on in there. And all that stuff's just like boom, 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 like really quick, yeah. And it's like no big deal. You just pay your copay, you get it done same day or whatever the availability is, If you have Kaiser, for example, I've gone there before, you see your primary, you check in and they send you downstairs to the pharmacy or they send you to radiology next door to go get your scans done and stuff. And it's quick.
Yeah.
In workers' comp, we have processes called utilization review and IMR. And so if you go to a doctor in workers' comp that's even authorized to see you in the first place, they have to request authorization before they can do whatever they want. Because if they don't get paid for it. So if you need an MRI, they have to request authorization for the MRI. That can be 5 to 14 business days, depending on the situation. And it may come back denied, which means your only remedy is to file an appeal called IMR. It's an independent medical review. And that process can take 30 days, 45 days, or even longer, depending on the circumstance. And
so let me get this straight. I need a procedure done. I have something going on. Sure, we'll handle your case, but let me ask for permission. Technically, they're busy. I'll come back with an answer whenever I can. And then they come back with the answer. It's like, the answer is no. And you've already waited all this amount of time for that answer, only to get a no. And then you have to go and fight that no. And it's just like never ending.
Yep. And that's once you have a doctor, right? And sometimes it's difficult to get to a doctor in the first place, I think a lot of clients at my firm in particular, they come to us and they're not happy with the doctor they've been provided by the insurance company. Not surprised by that. And they say, I want to change my doctor. I say, okay, great. We can set you up with a new doctor. But even that's a huge process.
Why?
Well, the doctors, they sometimes can be very picky about the cases they take. And for good reason. They don't, they want to make sure it's someone that they can give appropriate care for and that they can actually help and do something for. But so to get a doctor, we have to contact the doctor's office. We have to confirm that they're accepting patients. Sometimes just getting a hold of the doctor's office can take a little while, maybe a couple days. Once we hear back from the doctor, then we have to submit a request for authorization for a change in doctor to the insurance company. Legally, they have 5 days to respond to that. Mm-hmm. So the insurance company sometimes lags. Sometimes it can take, 10 days, 14 days. Again, if we request a hearing, sometimes that can take 30 days. So if they don't respond, there's no guarantee, that we can get it done more quickly. And so usually our process is to harass them and file for a hearing in hopes that, before the 30 days we actually get something done. But
it's a lot of work. Unnecessary too.
Yeah, imagine if everything goes smoothly, right? We contact the doctor's office, we get authorization in 5 days. The doctor's office says they won't schedule until they've received the authorization and the medical records, because they want to know what's going on in the case. Then they say they want to review the medical records first. Then once they've reviewed everything, they're willing to schedule the patient for their first appointment. You could talk about someone who was expecting a doctor quickly to wait a month or longer to get set up with their very first appointment. And that's not unique to our practice. It's just the way things go. And sometimes it can be more complicated. If the insurance adjuster takes 2 weeks to get the authorization letter, but then doesn't send the medical record. And,
or they go on vacation.
Yeah, or something's happening, or let's say we get no response and we have to wait for a hearing, and it's 30 days.
Right.
And we've even had cases where if there's a court case filed and there's a hearing date, usually the adjusters will assign a defense attorney. Mm-hmm. We've had some cases where we've submitted a request for authorization. We filed motions with the court asking for penalties and sanctions for delaying our client's treatment. We get to the court date, and there's no one there for the insurance adjuster. Yep. And then we call the insurance adjuster from court, and we're like, hey, what gives? You're supposed to be here right now. And they're like, oh, I didn't have it on my calendar. I'm sorry. The judge will yell at them or whatever and do their thing. But ultimately, sometimes that means that the case will just get continued to another date. We won't get our immediate resolution.
That's the worst.
Yeah. So it's like, I think the misconception is if a doctor is not assigned within a couple days, nothing's happening. But a lot's happening. It's just there's too many people involved. There's too many moving parts. There's too many requirements. And it makes it kind of a huge pain in the ass to get stuff done as fast as we want to for our clients.
And it's really crazy that you pinpoint this out, because if someone recently gets injured and they've never even heard or know or understand the way the system works in the workers' compensation world, there's no way in the world they would even imagine all of this is happening behind the scenes. It's like a web, and you have to kind of find your way to it's like a maze. You have to find your way to the end of it, but there's going to be obstacles along the way. And it's just like, no one's going to sit there and be like, hey, by the way, this is how this works. Maybe you'll get sent paperwork and stuff, but it's probably not easily digestible. And this sucks. This is like the worst case anybody can go through, specifically when you're injured and you don't know the outcome of what your next day is going to be like, and you have to wait around for people, and all you have is essentially your injury, and who knows, you're in pain, or you can't afford to miss one day of work, and you're trying to come on, let's get this going. That sucks. And I can totally see why a lot of clients in people that have had the opportunity to hire attorneys can turn around and say, you're not doing anything for me. I called you last week and you still haven't gotten that doctor appointment for you. It's like, hint, hint, your attorney can't set those dates. It's essentially the clinic and their availability and the approvals, and it's not like you guys do your little magic wand and poof.
No, and there's some doctors' offices that are great to work with, and they'll say, you know what, if you tell me that this is an accepted case where the insurance company has already admitted liability, the paperwork's just a formality. So let's get the patient scheduled. Let's get them in ASAP. We'll worry about the authorization and the medical records when we get there, but let's get it on the books now and let's get it going so your client doesn't have to wait. And there are quite a few medical practices that are set up like that, and it's great. Those are easy to work with. Other times, depending on where the client is, finding doctors in certain specialties can be already difficult because there's limited choices. And then of those doctors, maybe there's some that don't have really efficient practices set up or have rules in place where they won't do that, and it can make it more difficult.
Does this also come into play when, say, everything's been approved, right? Let's just say you've already gotten certain approvals to get certain medical treatment, or you're ready to go back to work, and there's other things stopping that next step. Besides medical treatment and approvals from doctors and the insurance companies and availabilities of each and when, what other things lag?
We call it medical legal appointments. So these are typically appointments with a qualified medical evaluator or an agreed medical evaluator. And these are doctors that typically assess things like your work restrictions, your disability status, which body parts are actually injured, And ultimately, what makes up most of the value of workers' comp cases is the permanent disability that someone has that couldn't be fixed through medical care. And oftentimes, getting to those appointments can take a very long time. QMEs are required to set within a certain amount of time. That being said, they generally max it out. There's a lot of doctors. They're really good doctors. They're really good QMEs. And they serve sometimes as agreed medical evaluators as well. And they book out for a long time for a reason, because they're good, and they take time to get to, and so their calendar's usually full. But in a situation where someone has an urgency, a really important need to see a QME, that can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
And so a prime example of this is when the insurance company has a medical report from a hack doctor, and the hack doctor says that the injury is not work-related at all. Go back to work. You're fine. This is all natural. You didn't get hurt at work. Blah, 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 whatever
you
BS is
sneeze
in it.
and threw your bag out.
Yeah, you're 25 years old and you didn't wreck your back falling 3 stories. It's degenerative changes that you've had. They're genetic. You see that crap. And unfortunately, the insurance company will latch onto that. And they'll say, you know what? We're denying liability for this case because Dr. Bob said, your injury is not work-related. So your remedy for that is to go to a qualified medical evaluator to dispute that doctor's opinion. Well, let's say you get the medical report from Dr. Bob. If you know what you're doing, you quickly go and obtain a QME panel from the state. You select the doctor if you're unrepresented, or you go through the striking process if you're represented by an attorney. You figure out who that QME actually is. Then you contact them. Maybe you don't get a response right away, maybe several days or a week. From there, if you send demographics, everything, you get a QME appointment set up, you could be looking at 30, 60, or 90 days out for your appointment. And that's just to see the evaluator. Now, once you get to the evaluation, you have to wait for the doctor to actually write a report afterwards, which legally they have up to 30 days following the evaluation. Then, if everything goes right, you get your appointment, you get your report, the insurance company doesn't object to it or have an issue with it, then theoretically they could accept liability, start paying you benefits, start authorizing medical care. But you're talking about, almost 90 days there. Now, let's say you get the QME doctor and they're unavailable, so you have to get a new panel. Or let's say you get to the appointment, and the day before the appointment, the doctor says, I'm sorry, I have to reschedule your appointment. We'll book you out another 60 days.
That's shit out of luck.
Yeah,
dude.
and I could go on and on, and this stuff happens. I swear, this stuff happens all the time. We have clients, they literally go to the doctor's office, and the doctor's like, oh, sorry, we didn't have you on the calendar today. We need to reschedule or something like that. Or the insurance company's obligated to send the medical records for these appointments. And sometimes the doctor says, where's the medical records? Well, I can't see you. I can't write a report unless I have all your records too. And so that delays the case again. And so you have all these circumstances where the case can get delayed. Or if the QME writes a report and the insurance company says, nah, we still like Dr. Bob's report more, then you have to go to court. You have to wait for a hearing so you can set your case for trial.
Damn.
You could talk about someone who has not gotten any medical care and no benefits for months and months and months before they even get a hint of justice. And even then, maybe not.
Now, let's be real. If someone was to hire representation, an attorney, does this somehow, way, shape, or form accelerate a little bit the process?
The process still sucks, I'm not gonna lie. There's no changing that process. I think what you get when you hire an attorney is the fact that they know the process, so they know what to do to make it the most efficient process as possible within the confines of the system, obviously. When we get a denial letter, we handle it just like that. We get our QME panel, we schedule as soon as possible. We make sure we send a cover letter. We make sure the insurance company sends records. We make sure the appointment's confirmed, the client has notice, and all that stuff. So what we're doing is taking all that off the client's shoulders. So the client they're told what to do, when to do it, and they don't have to think about it. But the process is still terrible.
Wow. This is insane. I'm glad we had this conversation because it does shed light into, the reality of what some of these workers' comp injuries can take. It's that path of the unexplained, but there's a reason behind it, and there's just a web behind it. It's a lot to digest, and I'm pretty sure we didn't even cover 90% of what other obstacles are set, in the system, whether it's through the court in general or outside of the court, through the medical doctors, through the system itself. Like, man, just, it's overwhelming. And I'm so grateful we had this conversation. I hope it eases some of your questions. I'm pretty sure there's more. If so, please drop your questions below and we will try to tackle on that subject once more. Is there anything else besides what you just shared that you want to take advantage of? And say it now.
A couple of things. One, if you're one of those people who are like, man, this sucks. Why is it me? Why is everything taking so long? It's not just you. I promise you. And if you want to talk about it, call us. We're happy to talk about it. If you're a client of ours, please call and talk with your attorney. If you're not a client of ours and you just want to talk to us anyway, we're happy to talk to you, but you're not alone. It's not just you. It's a really shitty process and everyone's in it, unfortunately. And, the other thing I wanted to highlight is there's a very big misconception in terms of the difference between what we do in workers' comp and what can be done in personal injury space. In the personal injury space, you can go see doctors whenever you want. Usually it's either through your own medical insurance or it's on a lien basis, which means ultimately the doctor gets paid back out of the settlement at the end of the day. The benefit to that is that you're not dealing with the insurance company. Everything's authorized, everything's happening super fast because the attorney can get things done like that because they have either your insurance to work with or they've got relationships with doctors who will see you and hope to get paid out of your settlement later. And so it's much easier to get stuff done in the personal injury space than it is in workers' comp.
And there's a lot more money involved, obviously. Some of the doctors are
sometimes. But I think that, there's a big misconception and misunderstanding where people who have friends who got in car accidents it wasn't work related, and so they got an attorney and they can get all this stuff done, no problems. But then they got in a car accident and it's work related and there's no third party at fault, and it severely limits the availability of medical care and doctors and things that are available to them that we can use in workers' comp. And so I think there is that misconception where people think workers' comp is like personal injury. And so it's a big difference in how things operate.
Workers' comp is just a different system. It's a slug.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, wow. That's good to know. Well, thank you again for sharing this information. We are going to jump back on another podcast episode. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit that bell notification so you get notified when we dump new content. Check out our Ask Bilal segment as well, where we drop questions that we pick from the comments from the audience and we answer them through videos as well. And most importantly, if you need help, ask. So that's simple. We'll drop all the information to Bilal's law firm as well and his entire team, who have helped over 8,000 clients here in Northern California, and it only keeps growing. If you really want to feel like you have someone who's taking care of you while you're trying to recover, then definitely get yourself an attorney. So we'll catch you guys on the next episode.